So my name is Alex, and I went to high school here in Liverpool in the UK. Our school was a bit different than some of the others in the area in that it's offered us a chance to partake in the combined cadet force. The CCF started for us once we hit 14, and you got the choice of either the Army, Navy, Air Force, or community service. Being a red-blooded male with a liking for all things military, I chose the Army. And it was honestly one of the most fun times I've ever had in my entire time at school. Every Thursday, we got to dress up in camouflage clothing to go to school, and this included boots, berets, all that stuff, and oh, my God, it felt cool getting into that gear and marching off to school with like every other kid in the area who went to other schools thinking we were incredibly cool as well. But it didn't come without its hazards. You see, like most high schools, there were a few bullies that made life for the rest of us pretty much unbearable, and I was no different. One kid was intent on making my life as terrible as possible. And I'd be lying if I said he didn't succeed on a few occasions. But little side notes here. I wasn't nearly as tall or as strong as this kid. However, once I got super sick of the maltreatment and decided to get a little payback, we were playing football one afternoon during PE, which is physical education. And me and my bully were on opposite teams. I ended up marking him, basically trying to make sure he didn't get the ball. Or if he did, he wouldn't have it much longer. At one point, he gets the ball, kind of chuckles when he sees me as if to be like, "What are you going to do, short stuff?" and tries to jump past me. I just throw myself into, if I may say so myself, a near perfect slide tackle, taking the ball out from under him and filling him like a freaking oak tree. He smashes into the ground when knocked out of him, appealing for a foul, but our teacher just tells him to get up as it was a fair tackle, albeit a little rough. I can't even tell you how amazing that felt, seeing that look on his face. But that feeling paled in comparison to the anxiety I felt when I realized he wasn't about to just let this slide. No pun intended. He was clearly out to get revenge in a big, bad way. And that was something I was definitely not looking forward to. Anyway, we ended up going on this big field trip to an army base just north of Liverpool at this place called Altcar. All the army kids are there. Since there'd been a lot of hype about the trip, we were to have an actual live firing session, field craft exercises, stuff like that. We were all really, really excited about the paintball session that they'd promised us at the end of the day. So all is going well until the field craft lesson. We were given these little pallets of camouflage face paint, get split up into two big teams, and then get told we'll basically be playing a giant version of hide and seek among this big wooded area that was contained in the base perimeter. All good, right? Nope. Big nope. Because I'm on the hiding team first. And my bully is on the seeking team. So off we go into the woods to hide. Me and a mate of mine managed to find these really, really thick bushes to hide, and pretty much impenetrable, and just chill there, keeping as quiet as possible. As we start to hear the seeking team like looking around the woods for us. It was such a rush here, and people wondering where we were, being totally oblivious to the fact that we were just feet away from them. So you can imagine our absolute disappointments when someone comes stumbling through the bushes to check if there's anyone there. Now, I know what you're thinking. It just so happened to be the bully that found us. Yes, but actually no. It was one of his mates, and while my friend just legged up the bushes to find a new hiding place, the bully's mate sees me and pounces. These are all the rugby players, so he doesn't have much trouble gripping a short little goblin like me and holding me in place while he starts shouting for the bully that he's found me. He's found me over and over again. I struggle, I fight, but it's no good. The kid pretty much has me in a vice-like headlock, and I'm not going anywhere. But the bully appears. Just so we're all clear on what's happening here. We all pretty much are completely alone in these woods. No one can see us, and the bully guy, who's completely bent on revenge at this point, has me right where he wants me. I honestly thought I was about to die for a moment. He starts punching me in the stomach while his mate holds me still. And as much as I'm kicking and swearing and trying to break free, it's just no good. The punches start landing on my face soon after, and I begin to taste blood in my mouth, and he lands punch after punch around my head and face. Right when I think it can't get any worse, he picks a stick up off the ground, snaps it in two, so that he's basically made a little spear, then starts saying how he's going to take one of my eyes out to teach me a lesson for trying to be the big man during football practice. I started doubling my efforts, kicking and screaming, and the guy holding me has to put a stinking, sweaty hand over my mouth to keep me from making too much noise. It was horrendous, literally the worst experience of my entire childhood, watching the sharp end of that stick creeping closer and closer towards my eye. I could still close them over, but that sort of makes it worse. Now I'm just stood there struggling away, waiting for the moment that sharp stick starts to push against my eyelid. Then, out of nowhere, I hear a shout. Like an LOI, followed by a load of rustling leaves. I was one of my fellows who had been assigned to teach us fieldcraft like this actual regular army bloke who was obviously in no mood to deal with spoiled posh kids. He throws the bully to the ground, and I feel the arm around my throat loosened and disappears. His mate turns tail and flees the scene. The bully got absolutely beast for the rest of the day, wasn't allowed to do anything else, including paintball, and had to go for these horrible punishment rounds. It cost a ton of stuff at my school, with parents complaining about the loose discipline, even though it was supposed to be the military. But after that, they never picked on me again. Maybe getting picked on himself made him think twice about the whole bully thing. But either way, school got a lot easier to deal with after that whole incident. I didn't have a proper girlfriend until I was in 11th grade. I had messed around with a few girls in middle school and high school dances and stuff, swapped numbers with a girl at a buddy's birthday party one time, but I'd never had anything serious. Nothing I was really emotionally invested in until then. Then just after the start of the 11th grade, a girl transferred to her high school from out of state. She was the cutest girl I'd ever laid eyes on in my entire life. I mean, she honestly still might be. Her name was Nora. She was born in Malaysia but moved here to Greater Boston when she was like 5 years old. She had these big dark brown eyes. I mean, so dark, they looked almost black, that darted around whatever room she was in, just shyly observing all the past. Her hair was so thick to I don't know if this is all Asian girls, but there just seemed to be so much more of it growing on her head than other girls. I can still remember how it used to sit on her shoulders, almost impossible to tame, no matter how hard she tried to do. So it had this weird kind of bounce and curl to it, like most Chinese, Japanese, or Korean girls tend to have this super straight hair. You guys know what I mean? But Nora's was wavy almost. God, it was so gorgeous. Her nose was super wide and flat. And she always mentioned how she didn't like it, but I just thought it was cute. Then her lips, oh my God. That was so plump and pink, like this gorgeous contrast between her golden brown skin and these soft rose pink peaches. Other guys in our grade used to make fun of her acne, and she did have a lot of scars from it along her cheeks, but I didn't care. I thought they were beautiful. She was imperfect. But still, I think I was smitten with her from the get-go. She was also a super nice girl too. Humble, smart, funny, the works. So it didn't take her long at all to find the little friend group that she could integrate herself into. And to top it all off, she was on the track team too. Usually a person is either super athletic or super bookish, but Nora managed to be both all at once. I'll just never ever forget the moment one of her track friends came over to me by the lockers and asked if I was seeing anyone. She was cute. Sure, but not exactly my type. All I wanted was Nora, but absolutely no idea how to approach her. Then, to my absolute shock, before I could even answer, the girl made it clear it wasn't her that was interested in, was the new girl, the Malaysian girl, the one on the track team with her. She asked if I knew who she was talking about, and I tried to keep my cool, but look on my face just totally gave it away. The girl just giggled, nodded, and walked away smiling. She was happy, but me, I can't quite describe how I was feeling. Although that's not going to stop me from trying. You know that feeling of when you super like someone and it's like butterflies will take that feeling, and times that by like 1000 I was so excited. I felt sick, like physically sick, and I swear to God, as I tried to put the padlock back on my locker. It took me a good few tries before I managed it because I was shaking, straight up shaking from the adrenaline. So I won't bore you with all the courtship details, but I ended up being with Nora for a while. It was a dream, teenage romance, everything a guy like me could have ever wished for, and for like 18 months of our lives, I think we were both truly happy and truly in love. But as the SATs approached, and we started looking at colleges, I realized I might not get the grades to be able to get my preferred major at Boston, U. I mean, Harvard was pretty much out of the question for me, but not to Nora. She was pretty much on track to ace her way into the place on a partial to full arts scholarship. Not only that, but I had kind of had my heart set on going to college down in Florida. There were some dang good schools down there. And that's not even covering the weather. I played a lot of soccer in Florida, is an excellent place for that since the weather is superb. And there's a sizable Latin community. So now that you know that, picture the scene. It's just another day of high school and happy-go-lucky me walks into school one morning, only to be pulled aside by a teacher and told I was wanted in the principal's office. Whatever for I couldn't possibly imagine. But I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. So I wasn't worried. Even though, maybe looking back, I really should have been, because the moment I walk in there, first thing I see is the uniformed police officer standing just next to the principal's desk. He had his shades on indoors. Who does that? But even without seeing the guy's eyes, I knew he was staring daggers at me. That principal asked me to take a seat. And the most Chris Hansen type, I know you're guilty way ever. So I do. I managed to keep my cool for about 30 seconds, while they spew a bunch of vague nonsense about wishing they didn't have to talk to me like this, how it's such a shame, blah, blah, blah. I snapped, telling them I'm pretty much a legal adult and they should just come out and tell me what the problem is. Then the cop says it. Something that made my jaw drop. You think you a man laying hands on a woman like that? So here's the thing. This all came to light in the week after one of the Door's friends had a conversation with her about college. She told her friend that she had her heart set on Harvard, and she would definitely not be moving down to Florida with me. She then apparently burst into tears and said something along the lines of, Sam is going to be disappointed with me, and scared to tell them. The friend then somehow interprets this as a confession that I was hitting her in private. And within about 24 hours, the entire school seemed to think that it was some kind of woman beater. You should have seen the looks I got around school that day. There were guys with full-blown yellow fever that straight up wanted to kill me. I remember walking through the school parking lot towards my car at the end of the day. And as I walked past this one kid's car, he started revving the engine really loud, then let his car lurch forward before throwing on the brakes. As if to say I could have, but I didn't. We ended up breaking up before moving away. And it was the worst thing ever. My heart was completely broken. But that wasn't even really the worst part. Some people in our little North Shore town just didn't seem to believe that I was innocent. And honestly, I don't think I did survive the year if I didn't move down to Florida for college. When I look back at my high school years, I always seem to remember one thing more than anything else. It's not the classes or the football or the fact that I had to transfer a lot because of my parents' jobs or the terrible cafeteria food. It's meeting a girl. Like I said, I was an army brat. And thanks to my dad having to move around the country a bunch, I had to chronically transfer between high schools, sometimes a year at a time, according to the therapist I visit these days. This was pretty bad for me. But I digress. Because it was during my senior year of high school out in Oregon, that's when I met Sophie. She was shy, reserved, to the point that some people just straight up called her old and ice queen. But she was so much more than that. She wrapped up her idealism in stone, and the way the world is these days, I don't blame her. We had a lot in common. I mean, an incredible amount in common, despite the fact that we lived on opposite sides of the country for almost most of our lives. But we were different in all the right ways. If they asked me complementary, if that makes sense. I was super passionate about things she was not. She was dead inside. As she put it. At one point, I was convinced that I would breathe life into her. But I didn't care what she said. She was honestly the most incredible young woman I've ever met in my life. And part of me thinks she still is even 20 years later. But it wasn't smooth sailing, not at all. You see, because I transferred to her school for senior year. I didn't really have any idea of what had gone on at that school previously. Blissful ignorance, I'd call it ignorance that was quickly shattered. About a month into seeing her regularly, she started to withdraw, started to kind of push me away. I confronted her about it, and the truth came out. At the time we met, she was fresh out of a long-term relationship with a guy of a few years older than us. I mean, maybe only a fortnight fresh out of it, and obviously was still super raw for her. She was hurting, and I totally understood why. But God, she was amazing. And I made it perfectly clear that I wasn't about to give up on her like that. This other dude had basically promised her the good life, marriage, kids, the works. Apparently he was a college grad with some lucrative new job in the burgeoning tech industry down in California. He made 6 figures, he was handsome, tall, pretty much everything I was not. But Ray, when it came to her dropping out of school, to start her life with him down in San Francisco. He told her he met someone else. Keep believe that, talking her up like that, only to let her down. I don't think anyone can blame her for feeling or acting the way she did. She told me she needed space, which I was only too happy to give her. I was heartbroken just like she was, and all of a sudden, we had something else in common too. I pretty much begged her to give me another chance. One night, I sneakily stole the key to my dad's liquor cabinet and drank a few glasses of vermouth. Yeah, I know, I knew nothing about alcohol. The smell that stuff gives off makes me ill even today, enough to get me emotionally lubricated, then ended up pretty much begging her to give me a chance. She agreed to, but on one condition, that I gave her some space for a week or two. And that's we wouldn't be exclusive for a while. How long? She didn't know. But she was freshly out of some sort of nightmare breakup and was just not ready to jump right back into the pool. So while all this was going on, unbeknownst to me, there was a silent observer. So right in the middle of me feeling terrible about what was going on with Sophie, a 10th grade girl I seen around school approached me when I was walking to my car one afternoon. Her name was Josie, and she excused herself before telling me she was really sorry about what was going on with me and Sophie House. He totally sympathized with the situation, that she hoped she could help take my mind off of it. It was so dumb of me. But I asked her out, there, and then I think I just wanted to show Sophie that I was entirely capable of finding another girl, I was demonstrating my value or something that might sound egotistical or selfish or whatever. But I think some of you might agree that I was definitely not thinking straight at the time. But do you ever think straight during high school? The entire thing is just a mess of hormones and emotions and pressure and stress. It's amazing. Any of us make it out of there intact. I ended up going on a couple of dates with Josie, and Sophie was well aware of what I was doing. I could tell she wasn't impressed, that she was even less impressed that it was a 10th grader, but what else was I supposed to do? Just lie in my bedroom feeling sorry for myself? I had to do something, in hearing Josie say those words. I can help you take your mind off that. Oh my God, you have no idea how comforting that felt her. It was exactly what I needed to hear. So we dated. I'm not sure if Sophie also dated either. I saw her walking around town with a guy at one point, but she'd been pretty open about her having a lot of guy friends, so I wouldn't have been surprised if it was just one of them. But with the time that I spent with Josie, it was nice. Really nice. She was, and as mature as Sophie, she wasn't as self-assured, but I liked her a lot, and she really did help me take my mind off of my heartbreak. Yet, she just wasn't Sophie, and no matter how lovely she tried to be, no matter how much she said what I wanted to hear, she wasn't the girl that I had fallen in love with. It sounds too cruel to say, but Josie just couldn't hold a candle to Sophie. There was little things like how she couldn't stand horror movies, something that is still a huge part of my life. How she was super into Disney and stuff when, oh my god, I can't think of anything worse than having to sit through another viewing of Cinderella. Gotta hate that saccharine, whitewashed nonsense. Things kind of came to a head when Josie asked me to be her boyfriend. I had to be brave, bite the bullet and tell her that I didn't want that. That I was still super hung up on Sophie, that I don't think I could commit myself to another girl. And the worst thing was that Josie appeared to understand. She was upset, sure, but she seemed willing to wait for me. It was only then that I realized what I was doing to her. Exactly what Sophie was doing to me. One heck of a love triangle, right? Or if you include Sophie's dumb Beamer driving rich guy, acts more like a love square. But anyway, one night says I'm sitting up in my bedroom, chilling and playing PlayStation. My mom comes into my room with me saying there's a girl on the phone. I assume it's Josie Cinch. She was the one calling me most nights just to talk or whatever. So me being an absolute idiot. Answer the phone like, "Hey, Joe. Joe, what's up?" Silence. Who was Joe? Joe? It was Sophie. And then now you might expect her to have sounded like annoyed or something? She wasn't. She almost sounded scared. I told her not to worry about that. A weak response. I know. But I just wanted to change the subject and find out why she was calling. But more importantly, why she sounded so afraid. I can't remember exactly how the conversation went. It's been years, but it went a little something like this. Did you leave something on my windowsill? No. Why? Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure I'd say so. If I did. You swear to God, he didn't leave anything on my window. So tonight. You haven't been around here at all? Yes, Sophie. Why would I lie about that? You told me to give you your space. And I have. Tell me what's going on. Well, someone did. Her voice was all shaky like she was on the verge of tears. What are you talking about? What did they leave? Heart? A frickin' pig's heart or a cow's heart of something. I don't know what, it was all bloody and gross. And there were flies all over the thing, and oh my god, I was so effing scared right now. I asked her if she wanted me to come over. But she said no. She just needed me to swear that it wasn't me that did it. So I did. I swore over and over that I would never ever do something like that. But it was the kind of thing an absolute psycho would do, and how that just wasn't me. I told her I loved her, Hall. All I wanted was for her to be happy. If that was with me, cool, if not, also cool. But I was not about to get all Hannibal Lecter on her, no matter how much it hurt that we couldn't be together. She calmed down a little after that, but hopefully a little. I told her if anything like that happened again, that she should just call the cops. Or that it might be an idea to do that already. Then an idea struck me. There were a lot of guys in our school who were into Sophie, and for obvious reasons. She was smart, hot, adorable, cute, and super approachable. Despite how introverted people thought she was. If it was one of those idiots, if one of them had dared scare the love of my life at that point, God, they would pay. But the next day I was hanging out with Josie after school. When I happened to bring it up in conversation, I told her the whole thing, every little detail, and naturally, she was grossed out. Who would do something like that? God, what a psycho, poor girl. Stuff like that. I was really, really worried, but like she'd done before, Josie helped me feel better about the whole thing. Whatever. criminally insane monster that had left butchered meat on a girl's windowsill was obviously too cowardly to actually confront her, do anything too violent. And like I said, Josie had this way of making me feel so much better about stuff. It's just a shame it didn't last long. And I never expected things to turn out the way that they did. Because a few nights later, I got a call from Sophia again. I happened to have the cordless in my room. Something my mom and dad used to get super angry about because it drained the battery blah blah, but I was a dumb teenager. As soon as I picked up expecting the call to be for one of my parents, I heard panic breathing on the other end. Jake. Jake itself. There's someone outside the house who? I don't know, but they're just staring up my window they waved to in this creepy way, and I'm so freaking scared right now. She sounded on the verge of tears. I'd never heard her so frightened before. I'd never heard anyone so frightened before. What, are your parents home? No, they're just out of town for the week. After so scared right now, please come over. Did you call the cops? No, I mean, I will. I'm panicking right now. Do it, call the cops and call me back. Let me know what the sitch is. A few minutes go by and the call comes back. She did call the cops, but they told her since no crime was being committed, they couldn't really do anything. They promised that they sent a patrol car, by which they did, but the person stalking Sophie had just hidden when they saw the cruiser and then simply returned when they were gone. That's when I told her to lie, to just call back and tell her the person that a gun, a knife or bat, anything to get those lazy idiots just to act. She said okay, that she called back when she was done. I hung up. 1 minute went by, 2 minutes, then 3. I was shaking, straight up shaking by the time I grabbed the phone and called her. I had to know what was going on. But now the line seemed to be dead. Not the kind of engaged dial tone that tells you there's a call on already, or one that directs you immediately to answer the machine. The line was straight up dead. Like someone had cut the line. I threw on my sneakers so hard. It actually caused an abrasion that I didn't even realize was there until the whole thing was over. Some big nasty, swollen grace thing. I ran out of my parents' house, check that bolted out of my parents' house with even shutting the door. I almost fell over myself as I heard my mom screaming at me like, "What are you doing? Jake? Where are you going?" I didn't answer. I didn't have the breath. I ran and ran and ran the entire way to Sophie's place, just over a mile. I think I might have ran a 5-minute mile, I'm not even kidding. I was fighting back the urge to puke by the time I got there and saw who she was talking about, a figure in a black hoodie standing outside her window. Only how safe didn't see the actual effing knife they were carrying, I don't know. Or maybe I do, was one of those combat knives with a black alloy coating. You probably know what I mean. I just slammed into them, trying to focus on holding the knife-carrying arm to the ground while I screamed at the top of my lungs for help. It was a struggle, a real struggle, but I remember the person being considerably weaker than me. Smaller than me, almost dainty. I had them on their back, one hand on their arm keeping it locked down. The other kind of like mushing their face. I didn't really know what I was doing. I've never been a fighter, but when I took my hands away from their face and one to their neck to choke them, I saw who it was. It was Josie. It had been Josie the whole time. Josie had left the animals' hearts. Josie, who had been apparently making hoax calls to her house. Josie, who had gone around to scare the life out of her with that black knife. All the commotion attracted the neighbors' attention, and the cries of "help, they get a knife" apparently got the cops there much faster and in larger numbers. Josie was arrested for carrying a bladed weapon with intent to endanger life, and the fallout of the whole thing was a drama that went on for months. Finally ending with Josie. His family moved her out of state to live with her grandparents. She wasn't a well person and apparently hadn't been for quite some time. Even though she was outwardly presented this cute little high school girl vibe. It was on the front. She was straight up manipulative and evil. And I know that now. I'm sorry this was such a long ramble. I wish I could give you a happy ending here and tell you that me and Sophie ended up back together and living happily ever after. But we didn't. Life isn't a Disney film. Half the reason I hate those things. The other half is living up in Washington somewhere, but where exactly I couldn't care less. I just hope I never see her ever again. My name is Callie, and I'm from the UK. I lived here all my life, but my parents are from Pakistan. So as you imagine, I grew up Muslim. I started secondary school, what we call high school here, only it goes for like 5 years and not for in 1999. And despite being one of the only Desi kids in the entire catchment area, I never had a problem fitting in. The thing was, I was always massively in the football, and if I do say myself, I was pretty good at it. One PE teacher said I was a natural left winger and if you were good at footy and could set up and score goals, and no one cared about what color you were or who you prayed to. And life was good. I had loads of mates and I cracked on with schoolwork. But that'll change one Tuesday afternoon in 2001. When I got home from school to find my mom and dad sat in the living room couch, staring at something on the TV with their jaws pretty much on the floor. The pictures showed some big tall building somewhere, smoke pouring out of one side. I thought it was fire. And well, it technically was, wasn't it? But I only really realized what was going on when I saw the second plane slam into the other tower. I actually gasped. My dad rose up from the couch and with the look in his eyes they hadn't seen before since he shouted me to go upstairs and get on with my homework. But I didn't. I turned on the little box TV that they brought me to play on my PS2 and tried to soak up as much info as I could. The next day in school was one of the worst days of my life. I don't know if any of you can relate. But I can't even really describe what it was like to have people I've known for years, people might have called friends, looking at me like they didn't want to be within 6 feet of me. I even caught a bloody teacher, giving me a funny look at one point, a teacher. People asked me why those idiots had done what they done. And I didn't have an answer for them. I barely knew my own religion at that point. And it was just kind of something I just did, not something I really thought about. I've had friends since that agreed like they went to church on Sunday because their parents told them to, because it was like tradition, not because I was like, oh yeah, I'm Muslim, and I want to be here. It was super boring. Listening to some old bearded fella droning on, and the language I didn't really understand. My mom and dad did speak a bit of Urdu around the house, but they brought me up to be English as the next kid. Point being. And I know it might sound silly, but people thought that like we were all in on it, or something, like it was a big conspiracy that all Muslims were like celebrating or whatever, which was absolutely bollocks. But try telling some of them that. So this all went on for about a week or so. And the bullying got progressively worse. It wasn't everyone. I want to make that perfectly clear. My core group of mates never deserted me. But like I said, things got worse and worse as the weeks went on. I think the worst thing is that from things that I've learned since, that a lot of kids felt empowered to give me a hard time based on what their parents were saying at home. They didn't think it was wrong, like collectively punishing Muslims for something a bunch of backward cave-dwelling whackers thought God was telling them to do. Yeah, there's some weird stuff in that book. But there's weird stuff in every religious book. He just focus on the good stuff about loving people and being a good person, and not how you can be ripped apart by a bear. If you make fun of bald people, which is in the Bible, go look it up. Come out the bald head, just Google that phrase. But anyway, I'm sorry to ramble. But one day I finished school a little bit later than usual. We all finished at the same time. I had to return some library books I'd rented from the school library that had helped me write an English essay. School is pretty quiet. The halls are emptying out. But when I walked down the steps towards the front gates, I see like a big crowd of kids standing just outside, are congregating near the big iron gates. Moms of people aren't unusual to see around schools at home time. I know. So I don't really think anything of it while I'm filing out and walking past them. There were kids in uniform, our uniform, but also kids with uniforms from other schools in the area, as well as kids in their own clothes. I walked past them, but as soon as I do, I just feel everyone's eyes on me. It was one of the eeriest feelings I've ever felt in my life. No one likes being the subject of such attention like that. Well, maybe some do, but not me. I started to look back and see all those moody faces just bearing down on me. And in that instant, my heart rate went through the roof. And they were really obviously not to be friendly at all. Quite the opposite. In fact, my adrenaline was pumping as I started to hear them like whisper among themselves. There he is. That's him. That's the muscle right there, and have gone do it and didn't even wait to try and talk my way out of it. So I just ran. Not ran leg, it sprinted absolutely bloody well, bolted across the road, almost getting hit by a car in the process. The car beeps dead loud, the driver shouts something, and I think the noise then sends the mob into an absolute frenzy. The shouting and screaming at me as I sprint full pelt in the direction of my neighbors have been walking home for years, always the same route, so I knew it really well. And thanks to playing footy, like 3 times a day, I was fast as anything. Big shout out to my old roommate, David Oakes, for chasing me up and down the left wing for years. Without, I think I'd have had my teeth and kicked out there and then. But that didn't mean I didn't come close. There was one point where this big lad, who was red in the face with rage, actually managed to grab hold of my backpack before I shook him off and darted down an alley. With me being small, I slipped through the metal bollards easily. Well, he had to probably turn side on to get through them. That gave me just enough of a lead to get away from them. And I think I just lost them quickly after that as I ran over a railway bridge and down another alleyway. I'm not gonna lie, I cried my eyes out when I got home to my mom. It was without a doubt the most scary thing that's ever happened to me. I was 13, for God's sakes, still basically a baby, and I was being made a bloody scapegoat for something that happened like 1,000 miles away. And I can't tell you how horrific that was. My family actually ended up moving cities not long after, live in an actual Muslim community where abuse like the stuff I'd experienced became a thing of the past. But that's not solving the problem, is it? Retreating to a little cluster was the opposite of what our country needed when people more than ever needed to see that. We can be just as British American or whatever nationality as anyone else.